What's up, everybody? Paul from #Sports. Just checking in. It's been a little bit. Training camp is officially underway, and we are obviously thrilled for that. The crazy season, the speculation season is over, and boy, are we happy to be back to some semblance of normal, right? Back to football, back to the fun. So let's talk a little bit about the Buffalo Bills. First off, I want to point out one of the very big things about training camp is how many open roster spots you have. Right now, according to overthecap.com, Buffalo has 88 rostered players right now, 88 players under contract. They're allowed to have 90. So the Bills still have a couple spaces to play with there. Again, over the coming days, could be an injury, could be whatever the case may be. You may see some traction there. Obviously, we had some players come back with on the MPI list. So that's Jerry Hughes as a calf strain. Those types of things happen. Really nothing to be concerned about. But the one thing I will say is that a veteran defensive end walking to training camp, not being able to practice, is a big deal because it's going to give these young defensive ends, primarily speaking of Carlos Basham, Greg Rousseau, and AJ Epineza, it's going to give them opportunities to play. And to a veteran, that's not exactly what you're looking for. You know that the team is invested in the future and those players. They've made it very, very clear. So it is something to be aware of. On top of that, let's talk about possible contract extensions. We've got Josh Allen, Tremaine Edmonds, both coming up on contract extensions. So let's talk real quickly about that. And then we'll look at this offensive line just across the board, as well as any camp news. Obviously, big waves are being made. Emmanuel Sanders is being is said to have that he had a jaw-dropping experience with Josh Allen. The play that he's talking about was actually a post route that was thrown to Cole Beasley. You can catch it on Buffalo Bills released that training camp video. It doesn't look like much, but what you don't see is an undercutting defender and a defender over the top right on Beasley, and the ball was just knifed in. Like, it was just a gorgeous throw. It flies by quick. It's only a 45-second video. It moves quick, but it's worth it. And that is what Emmanuel Sanders was talking about when he said, I had a jaw-dropping experience. That's what he's talking about, is that great throw. B Lightning's in. Paul Berg, I did get a haircut. D's, John Marlowe. What's going on, guys? Mr. Rogers Homes, always in. John, thank you for the promo for Mr. Rogers Homes, our Arizona relocation specialist. Actually, if you're looking for income property, let's say you want to have an Airbnb. You buy a property in Arizona, buy a place that you want to rent out to people. That's your vacation home. Go talk to Sean. Everything's in the description of this video. So let's get down a little bit. Oh, and Dan Galleries is in the chat. All right, so let's get down a little bit more to brass tacks, right? So let's start with everybody's favorite contract talk, and that is Josh Allen and Tremaine Edmonds. Now, let me throw a little bit of a wrinkle into the Tremaine Edmonds, Josh Allen talk. Now, first off, if you're going to give him a contract and it's going to contain signing bonus money, that means that signing bonus money immediately goes on to this year. Any signing bonus money that is given at any point ends up kind of restructuring this current year. So you're not going to see that, right? Buffalo really doesn't have the space to be giving money away for nothing. So they don't need to give Josh Allen or Tremaine Edmonds a contract signing bonus right now. You could give them a contract extension and then just restructure their contract at a later time. Let me give you an example. Let's say you want to sign Josh Allen to a 7-year contract extension, right? You're going to leave this year alone. You're going to sign the contract extension. He's getting no signing bonus. But what you do is you take it and put a roster bonus in, right? Once the season's over, you take that roster bonus. You say, you know what, that roster bonus, we're just going to restructure that, turning into a signing bonus. Contracts restructured. Everybody's good to go. You could do that right now. Now, there's a lot of talk about Josh Allen trying to get to the table before Lamar Jackson, because again, we're talking about that $40 to $45 million range for Lamar Jackson. A lot of that's speculation, but it's not unrealistic, right? Kind of, if you can get Josh to 41, 42 mil per season on average, that's a pretty sweet deal given the market. You could do it. You could do it now. You just can't give him signing bonus money now. Kind of the same thing for Tremaine Edmonds. The question is, do you really want to pay Tremaine Edmonds the money that he's going to command? Now, Pro Football Focus, and okay, I'll pause for a moment so you can all throw vegetables at the screen. All right. Pro Football Focus has Tremaine Edmonds ranked last year 74th out of 81 total defenders at the linebacker position. In pass defense, he was 54 out of 93. On pass rush, he was dead last at the linebacker position. And in coverage, he was the third worst linebacker. PFF does not like Tremaine Edmonds. So you kind of go back and say, okay, well, it's just a source. You don't necessarily have to like it, but it's a perspective. You may not agree with it, but it's a perspective. And there's going to be free agent linebackers out there. Buffalo has really kind of avoided giving him any sort of support. So they seem to want to leave Edmonds on an island. Same thing that you did with Edmonds, or same thing that you could do with Allen, you could do with Edmonds as far as a contract. Don't give him any new money now. Put it as a roster bonus on a contract extension, restructure at the end of the year, and pay the man. You gave him his guarantees, and that's that. MP says he's not a very good linebacker. Remember old-fashioned trousers. I missed the all-important Christian Wade section. Every episode, Christian Wade gets mentioned. Running back position is as wide open a competition as it gets in Buffalo. It's as wide open as it gets. I'm a big fan of Matt Breida, but I understand how all this is going to play out, right? It's going to be a hot hand approach, and that's just going to be what it is. It's just going to be a hot hand approach. From a fantasy football perspective, Buffalo's a team that you avoid pretty much at all costs. And take a flyer on one of these guys if you want. But the fact of the matter is, Devin Singletary doesn't catch the ball particularly well out of the backfield. Zach Moss ran into some injury problems last year, and Matt Breida has historically had injury problems. So, and Christian Wade has not a single NFL game time snap to his career. So it's not exactly the most dynamic backfield in the NFL. But when you're throwing the ball 45 times a game, how dynamic does it really need to be? Dan Gary says 2021 will be a determining year for Edmonds. I completely agree with that. You're not going to give Edmonds money until you see what this looks like. And you might end up seeing the same thing with Josh Allen. It was such a meteoric rise that part of it, you just have to pump the brakes a little bit and say, you know what? Let's not get Fitzmagic now. Let's not get Fitzmagic. Let's just wait a little bit and see how much of this was Josh just being a better athlete than other people, and how much of this was Josh understanding the offense, reading defenses, the long-term things that you need a quarterback to do. That's kind of some of the problems that you ran into with Carson Wentz in Philadelphia, was that they anticipated the quarterback responsibilities would improve over time, and clearly the organization didn't feel that way any longer. Kind of same way with Jared Goff. You paid Jared Goff because you anticipated his skill set to increase in particular areas, and obviously it wasn't. Now, we can make the case that the LA Rams offense is Sean McVay's way, and that's it. And basically any quarterback can play it because it's primarily a spread system. He doesn't even want quarterbacks calling audibles. But that's beside the point. I wouldn't be shocked if you see a Josh Allen contract extension in the middle of the season. Again, it won't contain signing bonus money. It would have to be a roster bonus. But I get it, right? I get it. John Herring, what's up, my peeps? Yeah, what's going on, guys? Again, thank you for joining me, Paul, from Hashtag. So let's continue to talk a little bit about the defensive end position, right? Jerry Hughes is obviously missing some time. Mario Addison, again, you kind of have to start talking about how many defensive ends that you're going to keep. Buffalo's historically kept 5 defensive ends. So what does that look like, right? Well, that means Daryl Johnson, who you kept last year, is probably on the outside looking in. Really, between he and F.A. Obata are probably that 5th defensive end position, maybe. And that's if you plan on cutting one of Jerry Hughes or Mario Addison, or trading one of them. Listen, you went ahead and you invested some pretty decent leverage in being able to move those guys by drafting Greg Rousseau and drafting Carlos Bassam. They're first and second round picks. You just kind of imagine that they're on the roster, kind of de facto. You have AJ Epinesa, who, again, is pretty high draft pick for that draft class. We're kind of assuming de facto on the roster. And he's going to be playing defensive end. Okay. Well, then, If you go with just the drafted players plus Jerry Hughes and Mario Addison, that leaves F.A. Obata and Daryl Johnson on the outside looking in, which is probably the most likely scenario, truthfully speaking, but it sacrifices quite a bit on special teams. Daryl Johnson played quite a bit on special teams. F.A. Obata's got special teams experience. So we know how this team runs. We carried Taiwan Jones for an entire season. We know how this goes, right? As far as defensive tackles go, because all this is kind of circular, right? You got to talk about them all. Bills have historically kept 4. And I think there's probably a few that Buffalo would want to keep now. And again, we've been saying that F.A. Obata was a bit more of a productive player from the defensive tackle position. So we feel, Mario and I both feel that he's probably mislabeled as a defensive end. But with that being said, you're looking at keeping 9 guys in total. So who are those 9 guys? It's actually a really tough team to make from a defensive line standpoint because you've got Star Lotulelei, you've got Ed Oliver, Vernon Butler, Harrison Phillips, F.A. Obata, if you're going to classify him as a defensive tackle. You've got who's the kid that everybody fell in love with last season? His name is escaping me right now. Give me 1 second. Justin Zimmer. Again, a couple of those guys are outside looking in. With that being said, tough team to make. I'm not exactly sure what direction they're going to go, but with preseason games this year, we're probably looking at the team being able to leverage those younger players a little bit better than they had last season. Last season, with no training, with no preseason games, you kind of made up the roster of the guys that you thought could play for you tomorrow. That's why you saw Justin Zimmer on the practice squad, and he didn't get called up till later. Maybe throughout the course of the preseason, those guys would have earned looks earlier. It'll be interesting to see how this plays out. Again, preseason game number 3 is kind of the one to pay attention to there. You're going to see probably a cast of characters in preseason game 1, preseason game 2, probably a little bit more of a change, and then probably more towards what their final look is going to be in preseason game 3. Everybody knows preseason game number 4 is just a cut session. Let's see here. Andy C., what's the hat, Paul? Oh, that's the Lockport Storm. My son plays travel baseball, so that's what that's going on. I believe said the Bills just signed a couple offensive linemen, Marquell Harrell and Tyler Gother, most likely just camp bodies to get the roster to 90. Injuries are injuries. And the Bills are definitely not shy about signing offensive linemen. They are not satisfied with what they have. They're not satisfied very much at all. They went in and brought in a bunch of resources, both in the draft and via free agency. There's going to be some very good players. And truthfully speaking, they've brought in starters, guys who have started around the NFL for a while. Now, is that because they expect them to start? Well, not necessarily, but we've seen Buffalo take those assets, wait for injuries, trade at the end of camp. And maybe that's what we see again. Brandon Beane has been able to turn picks in for Zay Jones and AJ McCarron, Lee Smith. He's been able to make these deals before with players who have starting experience in the NFL. We might see the same thing again. That's why a player like Bobby Hart is so fascinating to me. While Bobby Hart scares the absolute living hell out of me, the man has started in the NFL for quite some time. And that's valuable to teams depending on attrition, who you lose. We'll see, right? That's a tough call. That's a real tough call. I do want to talk about the secondary a little bit because, of course, everybody's conversation goes down to that CB2 position. And while that's a valid argument to make, I actually want to talk about linebacker just a little bit. And here is why. In the pre-draft process, Mario and I were both 100% sold that the Bills were going to go out and draft a strong side linebacker. You know, that was going to be what happened. And the draft comes up and you're looking at all the linebackers on the board and like Buffalo's going to grab themselves a really nice hybrid linebacker, probably a guy who's coming down as a converted safety or an undersized linebacker. That's what they're going to do. And they didn't do that, right? And you see the way that all this is playing out, and you just can't believe that Buffalo is satisfied at the linebacker position either. While they did resign Matt Milano, while they do have Tremaine Edmonds this year and next year, outside of that list, it's a pretty thin crowd. And that's kind of where I think it's really, really important to remember Buffalo is a buyer, Buffalo is not a seller, right? And I think we as fans often get caught in thinking the Bills are going to be selling players for capital because that's what we've seen recently. Last couple of years, we've seen Buffalo do that. I'm going to caution you against that logic. Let's not forget, Buffalo is a buyer. You have a window right now with a quarterback on an affordable contract. You've got an elite level Stephon Diggs. You've got an up and coming player in Gabe Davis. You've got Emmanuel Sanders for 1 year. You've got some question marks at the tight end position, and you've retained basically your entire starting offensive line from last season. So you've got a window right now where you're not paying your quarterback $40 million. This is when you take your shot, right? This is the window. And I can't believe I could say that and mean it, but the fact is, this is your window. If teams like Seattle don't tell you that, and Green Bay, even Green Bay's been dumpster diving for players for a decade now because they've been paying their quarterback such a high rate of the salary cap. Seattle's the same way. Those teams with those elite level quarterbacks, you have to learn to compensate salary for young talent as those quarterbacks age. If you're in need of a linebacker and you're not entirely sure Tremaine Edmonds, you need to go out and get something for yourself. And we've seen, unfortunately, Edmonds and Milano go down with injuries in the past, and that's a scary time to be a Bills fan when that linebacker group gets thinner and thinner and thinner. And I know everybody's going to say, well, there's players out there that can help you. You can go out and you can get a Chandler Jones who doesn't fit what Buffalo does in any stretch of the imagination. But what I will say is I will not be shocked when Buffalo either acquires another linebacker or aggressively hunts the waiver wire and cycles linebackers on and off their practice squad looking for the next, right? Looking for that next guy up. You are just simply too thin at the linebacker position for this upcoming season. And while players like, let's see here, what would be a good example? Well, you've got a player like Andre Smith, who can play linebacker for you. You have Terrell Adams. A lot of people are really excited about Terrell Adams. Not really there, right? I know people really love those tackle numbers, but I'm just not really there. The fact of the matter is you're not really future-proofed very well, minus a Matt Milano or Tremaine Edmonds. None of the linebackers on the roster have a skill set there that are comparable to theirs. Now, of course, you're talking about, Edmonds is an elite level athlete. While you can say what you want about his linebacking ability, he's an elite level athlete. And Matt Milano is an above average linebacker. I know those terms might rub some people the wrong way, but I'm just looking at this trying to be as pragmatic as possible, right? I think that your biggest weakness right now is assuming that you're okay. And that's one thing that I want Buffalo to really try and focus on. Don't settle. You're not okay. You've got a huge roster right now at 90. And there's a lot of players that you will cycle in and out of, but you should not think that you're okay for one moment. You do need some backup in the linebacker position. You need a little bit more safety help. You need some help at the cornerback position. You're clearly not very happy with your offensive line, with the volume of offensive linemen you brought in. There's a lot going on here. I know Paul Berg, because I see it in the comments section, Paul Berg is hammering Deion Dawkins for not being a great offensive tackle. Fact of the matter is he's affordable. You're not going to have to cut him based off of his contract. He's affordable. And you've got a right tackle right now in Darrell Williams, who, again, affordable. The Bills have done a great job of not tying themselves to bad contracts. With that being said, at some point, the Josh Allen extension is going to collide headfirst with a need at right tackle, with a revision of a left tackle contract. And I think that's kind of why Buffalo is so aggressively looking for those premier talent positions, your tackles being a premier talent position, your defensive ends being a premier talent position. Those are not pieces you can find on the free agent market. And if you do, you can't really afford them, right? And that's what you see a lot of average teams do is they think they're a player away. Like we'll look at Cleveland just as an example. They paid an absurd amount of money for Clowney because they have a quarterback on a rookie contract. They feel they were missing that piece, so they paid a lot of money for it. Production aside, you pay a lot of money there. I see Trek Review asking, could you trade Mitch Morse? The fact of the matter is, you have no other centers on the roster. No centers on the roster. There's no Mitch Morse has no concern for his job right now. None. No concern. Nor should you be worried about Mitch Morse being traded. There's no risk to his job right now. You have Ryan Bates who can play center. You have John Feliciano who can play center. Are they better than Mitch Morse? No. No, they're not. Does Buffalo need to have the cash? I mean, cash is nice, but no, you don't need that money. And the fact of the matter is, right, you love the production of Josh Allen last season. You're going to try and keep that as consistent from last year as possible. And that's why you saw them bring back so much of the offensive line. You found something there. You kind of don't want to mess it up. So you're going to keep as much of that as you possibly can. And I guess that's kind of where the last piece of this comes in. And that is your wide receiver position. There's a lot of wide receivers on this team. And Buffalo's been sneaky about the kick return position. So Buffalo has, of all the wide receivers, I think 3 or 4 guys with return ability, right? I know Jake Kumar is his mild return ability, primarily special teams experience, but not as a return man. We obviously know Isaiah McKenzie has return ability. Marquez Stevenson is obviously, obviously on the list. There's a couple other guys that they brought in. Lance Lenoir has return experience. You're loading up on young receiver talent because that's the next level for you, right? You know that at some point Emmanuel Sanders is a short-term solution, and the fact of the matter is so is Cole Beasley. Stephon Diggs has, several years of elite level talent, elite level physicality before you start having to even be concerned about a physical decline. So that's of no risk or concern right now. But you need to find that mix of young talent that will allow you to pay the players that you need to pay. And that's why a player like Jake Kumar is so fascinating to me, right? Because he's got a skill set that will translate across multiple NFL teams, yet here he is in Buffalo. And he's curious to me, very curious player to me. I really want you guys all to think about what that wide receiver group looks like. Assume they keep 6. Let's just assume they keep 6. In the comment section, go ahead and put your 6. Who do you think are your 6 wide receivers that you keep if you're Buffalo? Now, mind you, right, we're going to start losing roster spots. We got the tight end position still. We're not going to talk about that today, but you got Reggie Gilliam, who's technically listed as a fullback. Like there's some give and take here on the flexibility of the roster. But the fact of the matter is, who are your 6 wide receivers that you're keeping? Right? It's a hard group to nail down. That's a real hard group to nail down. Let's see. B Lightning says, Paul, does Knox make a jump like Allen this year? Critical year, right? Critical year for Dawson Knox. If we see a drop rate like we have, it's game over for Dawson Knox. It just is. With that being said, the tight end position hasn't often been one that Brian Daboll has been enamored with as far as production goes. But what Dawson Knox does do, and what Sweeney has done in the past, is giving you those big splash plays, right? I think that's kind of where you have to look at Dawson Knox and Tommy Sweeney and to a point Jacob Hollister. You're not looking at them to get 7 or 8 targets a game. You're looking at them to get 3 or 4. But you want one of them downfield, right? It's about sprinkling in those deeper targets to remind the defense that those guys can stretch a field for you. Now, of course, they're not. None of them are Travis Kelce. None of them are Darren Waller, nor would you expect any of them to be. But the volume of targets, you have to really question at some point. You just can't spread the ball around enough. every time you're going to throw the ball, that takes it away from the resources that you've invested in Matt Breida and Devin Singletary and Zach Moss. But have you really invested all that much? Well, not necessarily. But every target that you throw to Dawson Knox is one less to Cole Beasley or Emmanuel Sanders or Stephon Diggs, which is why I don't think this year is you need Knox to take a step forward. But I'm pretty adamant in the fact that if you see an 80 target season from Emmanuel Sanders, you're going to see a 60 to 70 target year for Gabe Davis. You're going to see an 80 target year for Cole Beasley. You're going to see, again, a +1 share for Stephon Diggs, with all these being considered with the extra game, right? And I guess that's kind of where we're going with this. If you're Buffalo, you're throwing the football. You need to know exactly what you have. And John Herring brings up Isaiah Hodgins. Hodgins is doing the best he can to make this roster. That's a tall order. And Hodgins was a later pick who was injured last year and who, if you waived, would make it to your practice squad. In all likelihood, you'd probably get him to your practice squad, which means probably the end of Duke Williams' career in Buffalo, although he's still on the active roster. Maybe Duke makes the team. Again, leave it in the comments section who you think. The fact of the matter is, there's things that great and elite level tight ends do that this tight end group won't do. That's finding soft spots in the zone. That's being aggressive at the point of attack. And that is being able to flow with your quarterback as things break down. That's really where Josh made his money last year, was flowing with things as they went to absolute hell. And Knox and Sweeney and Hollister are all athletic enough to do that, but don't necessarily have the savvy just yet in order to do that. Or maybe they do. Maybe we'll see that this year, but they didn't necessarily display that last year. But I'll tell you who does have that savvy. That's Emmanuel Sanders. He's open all day. As the route breaks down, he's open. He's not going to get you anything after the catch. You need to understand that right now. He's not going to give you a single thing after the catch. Your tight end group probably isn't going to either. This is a hard team to make, guys. This is a nasty team to make. But Buffalo has to start fitting themselves for the future, because the dollar they don't spend this year is the dollar they save for tomorrow, which is the dollar that probably ends up going to Josh Allen at some point. And you have to start looking at where they're going to shave those corners. Where are they going to find value? And they have to start finding value in starters, specifically on that defense. They have to. It's not a matter of how they're going to do it. It's a matter of when they're going to do it. You likely have this season with no interruption for Jordan Poyer and Micah Hyde. But at some point, you need to look at them starting to give playing time to another player as those players age, and likely on a rookie deal or on an unsigned free agent deal, or a player they picked up off of waivers, a player that they've brought up from their practice squad. They're going to need some level team control at the safety position in the next 2 years. They're going to need some level of team control and contract control at the linebacker position. They certainly are going to need to refresh the defensive tackle position, because I can't imagine that Oliver's realistically in line for a contract extension at this point. Harrison Phillips is coming up on the end of his deal. Again, Buffalo seems to be pretty happy to cycle in defensive tackles and not have too many qualms about that. And you're going to start seeing across the offensive line. You're already seeing it. You're already seeing it across the offensive line. Look at the value of the contracts that they're paying those offensive linemen. That's an offensive line that you have when you're paying your quarterback $40 million a year. The exception is you normally don't pay your right tackle as much money. So Buffalo's going to continue to look for a tackle, even with Darrell Williams on the roster. Darrell Williams has the most trade value of any player on this roster. The most. His contract's affordable, very affordable for a right tackle, even a left tackle, guy who has left tackle experience. Your most valuable player on this roster is Darrell Williams, and it is from a trade perspective, and it's not even close. Not telling you that's the deal, but that's probably the deal. Paul from #, guys. Talk to you soon.